following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome to another edition of Clare's Corner on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am your host. My name is Clare Hall, and every week it is my privilege, my joy to be talking with all kinds of interesting people about all kinds of interesting topics. And today it's a pleasure to welcome back a second-time guest. He's a Facebook friend. Hope to meet him someday in person. Very talented filmmaker and just all-around great guy, Jon Leonoudakis. Hi, Jon. How goes it today?
It goes great, Claire. It's good to be back with you and your audience.
Well, thank you. You have made films and documentaries, and it seems like either directly or indirectly, the subject matter always connects to what I think is, for both of us, our favorite sport and the great American game of baseball. And now you've got a new film out that certainly baseball is a part of it, but it's really a serious story and, well, an interesting connection. The title is The Day the World Series Stopped. So, as I was watching the trailer for this film, I realized, it's certainly a day that's burned into my memory just from sitting and watching at home, but for you, truly a very direct connection. So kind of give us the overview of what this film is about, your connection, and why you wanted to tell it.
Well, sure. I've been a long time baseball fan. I grew up in San Francisco, and in 1989, my team finally got a chance to go to the World Series, and my brother was a season ticket holder, and he invited me to go with him. And I was on cloud nine because I was going to get to go to my first World Series game and see my hometown team, the San Francisco Giants, play. And as you mentioned, I'm a filmmaker. I went to film school. I've been a producer in the entertainment industry for over 30 years now, working on a variety of things like TV commercials and documentaries, and I produce theme park attractions, very diversified. But on that particular day, it was all about the World Series, and it was all about baseball and my Giants playing the hated crosstown rivals, the Oakland A's. And so we got, I went to experience this amazing sporting event, and it took an incredible left turn into a traumatic natural disaster that was, of course, captured live on national TV. And I stayed the intervening 10 days because that's where I grew up. My folks lived there, so I had a place to stay. Plus, I was freelancing, so I didn't have a job I had to get back to right away. And then I went back to the game when it got restarted. And I realized that this was kind of a unique experience in that because I had a video camcorder with me, and I had a still camera and lots of film with me. I said, I really captured this experience from the perspective of a typical fan, but not just typical fan, but somebody who grew up in the city, who loved the city. And San Francisco is a beloved city of mine, even though I've moved away and live in Los Angeles since 1976. San Francisco is just like the Tony Bennett song. I certainly left my heart there. And so it was a very difficult, trying, emotional time. My brother went to the game with me. My wife was in the same area at the same time, and she was in a certain amount of peril. And all of this sort of was happening over a period of about 10 days, and I captured all of it through my still pictures, the stuff that I shot with the video camcorder, and I recorded a lot of local television news while all of this was going down, and I realized I've got a great 3-act story to tell, so I I put it all together, and I released this around 2014. And I'm bringing it back up now because this year is the 30th anniversary of the dreaded Loma Prieta earthquake that took the lives of 64 people. And the San Francisco Main Library has asked me to bring it, and it'll be screening there on October the 19th, which is a Saturday at 1 o'clock, and it's free in their Corette Auditorium. But that's what was going on, and that's why I decided to make the film.
Uh-huh. And so, I'm just remembering the indelible memory sitting in my apartment in Newport watching the pregame commentary, and as I recall, the camera began to move up and down rather rapidly, and I think Al Michaels' words were, "Tell you what, we're having a," and then the signal cut off, and I thought, oh no. And so you literally were there in the stands, and can you just give us kind of the sense? I'm sure being a San Francisco and California native, did you instantly know it was an earthquake and have any kind of sense of how severe it might be?
Yes and no. Yes, being a native Californian, you become very used to earthquakes. You do get a sense of the severity, but it depends on where you are. And in this particular instance, my brother and I, we had already taken our seats, not far off of between third base and left field, right in the middle of that too. We had kind of field level seats. I think we were row N, and the first pitch was, I think, 5:25 or 5:30. Said, "Let me go get us some dinner. I'll go get us some hot dogs." And I was in line to buy a hot dog when the earthquake hit. And of course, Candlestick is. We definitely felt the earthquake. We didn't feel the severity of it because I think some of the vibrations might have been mitigated by just being on a giant concrete slab. So we're like, okay, and it didn't seem to last particularly long. Sometimes it's hard to gauge that thing in the moment, but, it's like, okay, it stopped, and we're like, all right, it's like a train went by, right? It's over. Let's go. Let's get it. It's the World Series, for crying out loud. And it's interesting because the hot dog vendor said, and it was a temporary stand. It was not one of the usual ones that they had set up because the World Series was so many people. They had like these temporary stands against the wall, and I remember the lady going, "All right, I lost power, so all sales are cash only." And at that, when the ground was shaking, the first thing we always look for, is where are we going to go to protect yourself from falling debris? And I looked up above me, and I saw that giant lip of the stadium that holds the whole upper section above me. And I looked around, and it was so crowded with people still coming into the game and people trying to get to their seats and what have you. I said, "There's nowhere to go." I said, "That thing comes down, it's just over." It was just packed. And I had accepted my fate because there was nowhere. I couldn't move. And so once it stopped, I said, I better go back to my seat. I want to check on my brother, see how he's doing. And the place was stunned. Yes, there were people who were like, "Yeah, we're still into the game," but people had seen the wave of the energy of the earthquake ripple all across through the field. It was funny, when it got to the warning track, it kicked up dust from the dirt. And you started to hear people in the fans. We're all, Californians, and all right, let's go. And you started to hear them say, "Let's play ball. Let's play ball." And then we started to see more policemen and so forth, police officers coming onto the field, ringing the field, and there's an announcement, anybody sitting in the upper deck, please come down. So things started to change rapidly not long after the quake. But still, it took a while for us to get the word that, hey, you know what, this game isn't happening. There was still a lot that was going on. It was where we were sitting. A lot of the A's players' families were sitting in and amongst us, and the A's players would come down on the field level area very close to where we were and waved their loved ones down, and they would climb onto the field with them.
Wow. And I remember when the TV broadcast was resumed, and it just must have. I mean, when you're in the middle of something like that, must have taken some time. I mean, the fact that they canceled the game, that was certainly a message that this was something serious and really tragic. Jon, you lived it. As you said, you had so much of your own footage, your still photography, the news broadcasts you had archived. When you went to put this film together 25 years after the fact, did you have to do much, if any, original research, or did you pretty much already have the whole story right in hand?
Well, no, you have to do research to make sure you're getting the entire picture. I did extensive research. I think any good storyteller, you want to get your facts right. And I also made it my business. I wanted to find out how each and every one of those 63 people died, because I felt connected to them, because I'm a San Franciscan. I'm a native of the Bay Area, and those people were part of my world. They were part of my community. Yes, I didn't know any of them, but it's a small area, and when you live in an area like that, you realize how close you are to people, like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And it was my town. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. And as you mentioned, when all this was happening at the ballpark, now this predates social media. Cell phones were just for people who had a lot of money or people who had and they didn't do people much good anyway once those things hit. But so we were sitting in the ballpark wondering what the heck was going on. We were getting our information the old school way, through the transistor radios from person to person, and then when we got out into the parking lot, people had battery-powered television sets, and now we're seeing the smoke from the fire in the marina, and we're seeing the collapsed portion of the Bay Bridge, and we're hearing about the terrible freeway collapse. And now it's starting to hit home. And then what's really getting to you is that if you live in this area, where that ballpark is built, Bayview Hunters Point is the highest crime rate in the San Francisco Bay Area. And you really want to be circumspect about being there after dark and to be somewhat helpless. And so getting out of there was really tough because there was so much traffic. And all the first responders, they're busy. They're not going to help you if you're getting mugged or you're getting robbed. So we were immediately launched into this sort of a year of living dangerously sort of experience. And it was, somebody actually knocked on our door car door while we were trying to get out of the parking lot. There were 4 people who got there right as the earthquake had just finished, and they had been dropped off from the airport. And they said, we'll give you $200 if you'll take us to our hotel in Union Square in San Francisco downtown. And, there was a senior citizen with them. They were a little bit older people. And we said, just get in the car. We had room for them. We didn't take their money. So we helped those folks out. But that drive from Candlestick Park, as the sun was going down through downtown, I think it's the one time I can actually say I've got some kind of PTSD. I've got a really good memory. I couldn't tell you very much about the drive from point A to point B. It was scary.
I can only imagine, never having lived through something like that. I can only imagine it, but you sure paint a vivid word picture, and I'm sure a vivid visual picture as well. And so, help me, Jon, how many days before the World Series was able to resume?
10. It was 10.
Wow.
And it's the only time what's that? I was going to say, it's the only time I've ever used a rain check on my baseball ticket.
Wow. Yeah. That kind of helped put things in perspective. We love the beautiful game, love the World Series, but, just a reminder how fragile our whole world really can be. And I think, for me, at least one visual I remember as a fan 700 some miles away, when you saw the players on the field still in uniform with their family members heading out of the park, that whoa, this is something that something I think none of us, no doubt, had ever seen in our lifetimes before, and hopefully we'll never see again. And I think, you mentioned the upper deck of Candlestick, and I believe you pointed out that had not some earthquake retrofitting been done, the tragedy of that day could have even been much worse.
You're absolutely right, Claire. A few years before the incident, some civil engineer working for the city of San Francisco said, "Hey, we got to take a look at the ballpark. It might be ready for some retrofitting." It opened, I think, in 1960 or something like that. So by that point, it was already 39 years old at the time of the quake. And so civil engineer, they got on it, and they put these, what they call expansion joints in the canopy. The canopy, of course, was the part of the structure that held in place the upper deck. And there were parts, specifically in right center field, where parts of that lip crumbled and came down. So there's a story, it's somewhat apocryphal, that a guy went to get a beer, and when he came back after the quake, a huge chunk had smashed his seat to pieces. And in the film, afterwards, I found a rather drunken fan with a giant chunk of concrete from the stadium that he was walking away with. That didn't happen a lot throughout the ballpark, but that particular spot, upper deck, right center field, they had a few pieces that came loose there. But yeah, I think that particular engineer who caught that might have saved a terrible human catastrophe from happening.
So let me ask you, was there anything particularly satisfying about making this film?
Yeah, it was. I think, it's a love letter to my city. I felt deeply connected to, the city had been wounded, and, these were all people from our community. And the places where the damage had occurred, they were so disparate and so random. The one in the marina struck me the most because that part of the marina had actually been built on debris of the terrible San Francisco earthquake in the early 1900s, which I found super ironic. And some of the people who died there, those stories were particularly touching about, a couple who were living in an apartment there, and when they were found, they had passed away, but they had died in each other's arms. And there was a mother who was trying to get out of her apartment there with, a baby that was maybe 6 or 7 months old, and the stairway collapsed, and she had the baby with her, but the baby had breathed in too much debris and died. Those kinds of stories got me, and then, of course, the people who'd been crushed to death in the collapse of the 880 freeway. And the Bay Area was more than most cities was designed to withstand a big earthquake, but there were pockets where there were vulnerabilities, obviously. So yes, it was a very personal. I think of all of the films that I've made, this one is certainly the most personal because I was an eyewitness to it all, and it was my city. That's where I grew up. And my wife was driving over the Bay Bridge. She had just crossed over 10 minutes before the collapse. And so, she was in harm's way, but I had no idea, how she was or where she was until I got home almost 3 hours later. It took us a long time to get home.
Oh, wow. Wow. So, Jon, again, would you remind us, of course, this program will live on forever in the Comfortably Zoned archives, but if people happen to hear it before the screening in San Francisco, again, remind us of the date, time, location.
Well, sure. It's going to be Saturday, October the 19th at 1 o'clock at the San Francisco Main Library. I believe that's 100 Larkin Street. It's there in the Civic Center, and they have a lovely state-of-the-art auditorium called the Corette Auditorium. But if you're not in the area, you can watch it right now on my Vimeo channel called The Sweet Spot. and it's a subscription channel just like Netflix or Hulu, only much more affordable, and it's only $1.50, all you can eat. And I've got about 8 hours of binge-worthy content on there, as well as this film. You can see Not Exactly Cooperstown, my film about the amazing and wonderful baseball reliquary, and the film I made about the sports writer Arnold Haino called Haino: A Century in the Bleachers, as well as episodes from my streaming television show called The Sweet Spot, a treasury of baseball stories. And we have a lot of additional outtakes from the Haino film, Not Exactly Cooperstown, on there. So if you like baseball and you like stories about baseball that you really haven't heard before or fly a little bit under the radar, I got so tired of all these baseball documentaries being about the same thing, Babe Ruth, the Yankees, Hank Aaron, Ted Williams. I love all those things, but what about the rest of the stories, the human stories? That's the stuff that interests me.
Yeah, me too. And as a satisfied subscriber, I just want to tell people, it's a treasure house of delights. And I think, as we discussed before, one of the neat things about this format that you're not shoehorned into a particular time slot like you would be with a network type of broadcast, that you just are able to let a story unfold and breathe naturally. I mean, some of them, I would say, are just kind of short and sweet little nuggets, and others are more full course meals, and it's a wonderful variety.
Well, and they really are designed for today's audience. If you've only got a few minutes, the nice thing you can, when you look at it on the menu, so to speak, you can say, "Oh, well, that's 5 minutes," or "Oh, that's 7 minutes." Got 5 minutes, I can watch that. Or you might say, I want to sit down, I want to take in a few things, and you say, hey, the Jim Mudcat Grant piece about racism, wow, that's 45 minutes. I want to sit down and I want to watch that and I want to take it in. So we've got something for everyone, but along with these sort of short vignettes, some of which are part of the sweet spot, we also have the sort of feature-length films in, for example, I think Not Exactly Cooperstown is 63 minutes. The Haino film is about 50 minutes, and I think that the Earthquake film is about the same.
So obviously it is, a very much a passion of yours, a labor of love, and appreciate you sharing all of your wonderful stories and discoveries with all of us, Jon.
Well, it's my pleasure, Claire. To me, baseball is like an enormous buffet table. There's so much there. Baseball has always been a reflection of American society. It predates the Civil War. It's going through some struggles right now, but I think baseball has always been that reflection of our country, good or bad, whether it's showing the struggle of persons of color getting the chance to play the game, the problems of cheating and the problems of performance-enhancing drugs, the labor relation issues. These are all amazing reflections of our country, and even things like gender discrimination. I made a film about that as well, which is part of my Sweet Spot piece. Part of our mission is we wanted to put a spotlight on social issues as reflected through the prism of baseball, because baseball has been such a terrific prism to reflect what's going on in our country in any era. So I find baseball and storytelling, they just go hand in hand. Narrative is at the heart and soul of our national pastime. And what do fans do when we're at a game? We tell stories to each other in between innings, or we'll do a trivia quiz, which will lead to a story. And I was there the night Koufax pitched his perfect game against the Cubs. Yep. Oh, really? Where were you sitting? What was going on? I was with my dad. It goes from there.
Exactly. Well stated, my friend. Hey, can we turn to another baseball-related subject, and somebody I think we were both privileged in our lifetimes to meet, thoroughly admired, and we lost him not too long ago. And, the fact that we knew it was coming didn't make it any easier. But, of course, I'm talking about Jim Bouton, the old Bulldog, number 56, the author of Ball 4, and just to me, one of the nicest people in baseball and nicest people, period, I ever met. Your thoughts?
Like so many other people, he was one of my heroes. I remembered having his baseball cards when he was with the Yankees in the mid-'60s, and I remember him pitching in the World Series. And, you know, I was something like 11 or 12 years old when the book Ball 4 came out, and I was so excited. I remember all the hype that led up to it, and reading the book, oh, my God, my eyes were the size of manhole covers reading about, the sort of inside story of what it's like to be a major league ball player. And I read all the successive iterations of the book until I actually had a chance to meet Jim Bouton in 2010 as a member of the Baseball Reliquary. While I was working on the film, I talked to their executive director, Terry Cannon. I said, well, what do you think about having a special event to honor the anniversary of Ball 4? And he said, that's a great idea. And so they flew Jim Bouton and his wife, Paula Kerman, out. Tommy Davis was there, and my goodness, Greg Goosen. You know, those guys were both in the book, and they had a discussion on its impact on popular culture. So the filmmaker Ron Shelton was there from the book about the film Bull Durham, and plus. At the premiere screening of the Seattle Pilots documentary. It was a wonderful day, but I got to have dinner with Jim the night before with Terry Cannon and his wife Mary, and he could not have been a nicer, more personable person. You know, sometimes you hear, you really don't want to meet your heroes because you could be disappointed. But he lived up to all of my lofty expectations and more. Having that dinner with him was so special, and then participating with him the day before, and then interviewing him for the film, and having some communication. And he actually put me in one of the last versions of the book. He wrote about the Baseball Reliquary, and he wrote those little books about that, and he talked about meeting me and me being part of the celebration and making the film not exactly Cooperstown that he appears in. And he calls the Baseball Reliquary the People's Hall of Fame. And that name kind of stuck because anybody can vote for anybody for their Hall of Fame, which is called the Shrine of the Eternals. But he was that kind of guy that you loved to meet, and was really nice. I've had a chance to make friends and actually meet his son, Michael. I would have loved to have met his daughter. I cried when I read about her death in a car accident. You just can't help but tied to these people when a book like that really sears into your consciousness in the way Ball 4 did.
Yeah, it was so beautifully done. I mean, so funny. And I think maybe any of us who have ever felt like for one reason or another, a little bit like an outcast. Here's Jim with his artistic inclinations, loving to read, not really being in step with kind of the politics of most of his teammates. And there were so many wonderful tributes to him, and I think they must have all been shared on the Ball 4 Freaks page on Facebook that you started, and thank you for that, John. But, one thing that struck me, and, maybe I hadn't even quite realized it, but Jim's whole story, especially for me, his comeback in the 1970s, but really his whole story is a lesson in don't be afraid to take risks and follow your dreams wherever they might take you, among many other lessons from this remarkable man.
I think you're absolutely right, Claire. And it's to, stand up for what you believe in. And if there's something wrong is happening, do something about it. And stick up for people. And, we're all in this together. And, he wasn't a perfect guy. None of us are. I mean, we're all, as humans, we are flawed. But I think that he was somebody who tried to live his values and his beliefs. He's a man of his word, a person of his word. And I will always admire him for that and for being having a lot of courage. To write that book took a lot of chutzpah. And I've talked to some other people who played with him back then, like people like Jim Mudcat Grant. I asked him, I said, well, what did you think about that book? He goes, it was not cool.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what do you mean, Mudcat? He says, well, you know, he was telling stuff, you know, in the clubhouse. You know, some people, they might not have known he was writing a book, and stuff shows up. And I said, well, you know, I guess you got to, everybody has their own take on it. And, you know, I could see where people felt like they got caught short and they thought that the clubhouse was a safe place to let it all hang out, so to speak. But I think that book was a game changer, and it is a treasured book. I've loved it from the day it first came out. To this very day, I'm sure, like you and some others, I mean, I'll crack it open every now and then and get a good laugh.
Oh, yeah. You know, it is, I think, one of the few books that I can remember reading at least 3 separate times in my life. And as a teenager, I think I loved the funny and risque parts the most. And then the last time I read it a few years ago, the thing that I took away more strongly than in previous readings was, wow, what a commentary on mindless conformity in society, you know?
Yeah, there is so much to pull from that, you know, from a social perspective, philosophical perspective, and I agree with David Halberstam. It's not really a book about baseball. It's about people and human interaction and people who have this really strange job where you know 50,000 people are watching you at work every day. Not including the ones that are on television and the radio. So, it's a remarkable timepiece, and I think it's a book that will stand the test of time. And it was terribly sad to lose Jim. I mean, he was, 71? A little too soon for him to have left us. I think it would have been great to have more time with him, but I think he made the most of his time while he was with us.
He certainly did, and whenever we each reach the end of our journeys on this earth, may that be said of all of us. Jon, it has been a pleasure. As I expected, the half hour has just flown by, but if you're game, we'll do this again sometime, okay?
It would be my pleasure, Claire, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your show. I really appreciate it.
Filmmaker Jon Leonoudakis, we were talking about his film, we're remembering it as the 30th anniversary of the earthquake that delayed a World Series. The day the World Series stopped, many other fine baseball-related documentaries. The baseball series available on Vimeo, The Sweet Spot. So I'm Clare Hall. Thank you for listening in. And until we meet again, happy trails.
Are we clear?
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.